Marcos Jr. shares his first State of the Nation address, we are not going to fall for the deception of his empty words. We will not fall for his deception. Every single day, Filipinos are fighting for their lives. Will you join us? Will you join us? We must not be afraid. We must continue to fight back. Stop the disinformation and historical revisionism. Uplift the people's true history.
That is why it is up to us, as people of the U.S., to take a decisive stand for human rights in the Philippines, to defend the Filipino peoples in their genuine struggle for national democracy. To Senator Merkley, we can't wait another day for you to take the side of the Filipino people without the Human Rights Act.
We must continue to hold the Marcoses accountable. We have to hold them accountable for their stolen wealth.
All right, welcome everybody. Thank you for being here. Oh, I'm a little bit blurry, it looks like. So thank you for being here with our webinar for today. It is the Lumalaban ang Bayan Ko, martial law at ang Dinastiyang Marcos. We're gonna go ahead and just do a quick intro, and then we'll actually be singing, doing a cultural of Bayan Ko. Okay, so let's go to the next slide here. Oh, yeah, welcome. Actually, I'll say, so I'm Joseph. I'm with Bayan USA. I am the Deputy Secretary General and Propaganda Officer, and I am actually co-emceeing with Marie. Marie?
Hi everyone, my name is Marie and I will be the other MC today. I am the regional coordinator for Bayan Seattle. Shall we quickly go through the program, Joseph?
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so we'll have a pretty quick but really great program today. So the first thing we'll go through is right after this. Then we'll really be able to take some time to hear from martial law survivors from the time period, which will be really, really important for us to hear their stories and continue to ensure that they're shared and propagated. There will be another cultural from, I believe, Anak Bayan UCI or Inland Empire. I forget. I'm so sorry. And then some sharings from the recent Bayan Peace Mission and the recent Anak Bayan Expo trip that happened, and then just a general overview of like the current state of the Marcos Jr. regime, really is a continuation of the Marcos Sr. regime also. So that is our program for today. Let's go into the next slide very briefly. So before we really start off today, something we just wanted to ask folks is to please consider donating to Bayan to help support our operations. Again, we are grassroots alliance of different organizations across the US and then also in the Philippines. So any bit of support will really help us in being able to continue doing our work here in the US and then all over the world globally. The QR code is there. Please consider. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. And so, actually, before we start the program, let's go ahead and check out this cultural Bayan Ko a cultural performance by Annette and Dion from Anak Bayan, San Diego. So let's go ahead and take a listen, and then we'll actually break it down.
Ang bayan kong Pilipinas, lupain ng ginto't bulaklak, pag-ibig na sa kanyang balat, nagalay ng ganda tila, at sa kanyang yumi at ganda, dayuhan ay nahalina. Bayan ko, pinihag ka, nasadlak sa dusa. Ibon mang malayang lumipad, kuluning mo at umiyak. Bayan pagkayang sakta dilag, ang di magnasang makalpas. Pilipinas kong minumutya, pugad ng luha takdalita, aking arhika. Makita kang saktalaya. Ibon mang malayang lumipad, kuluning mo at umiyak. Bayang pagkayang sakta dilag, ang di magnasa makalpas. Pilipinas kong inumutya, pugad ng luha takdalita, aking arhika. Makita kang sakdalaya.
All right, thank you. So once again, we're here today as Bayan USA. Bayan USA is an alliance of grassroots anti-imperialist Filipino organizations. We represent migrant workers, women, youth, students, and among others. And Bayan USA really aims to arouse, organize, and mobilize the Filipinos for national democracy in the Philippines. Bayan USA is the first and largest international chapter of Bayan Philippines. And so even across the ocean, we're speaking up and wanting to say about what is happening in the Philippines, whether that's in the past and what happened under Marcos's regime, or even prior to that, but even to the present as we continue to fight. So something that we will actually take a look at is, we'll talk about the song. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide here. So Bayan Ko. So Bayan Ko, what is it? It is a translating as my country, right? Is one of the most recognizable patriotic songs of the Philippines, and it was often sang during martial law. of Marcos's time during when he called for it, right? And some may not know this, but it was actually originally written in light of the Philippine-American War and U.S. occupation. And the translation into Tagalog was some 3 decades later by the poet Jose Corazon de Jesus. So let's take a look at the actual translation, something that I really wanted to put emphasis on for the theme of this webinar today, for this evening, is around my country, Bayan Ko, and how we need to fight for it, right? And so on the left side in Filipino, what it translates to is it was love that, as per her fate, her being our country, offered up beauty and splendor, and with her refinement and beauty, the foreigner was enticed. My country, you were made captive, stuck in suffering. Uh, and then the original lyric on the right in Spanish, it actually translates a little bit differently, which is, she stored many treasures in her home that tempted the thief. And that is why the Anglo-Saxon, with vile betrayal, he subjugates her. My country is in prison. Take out the traitor. So really just emphasizing the theme of that our homeland is beautiful. Our homeland is stored with many treasures. It is a treasure. And like a beautiful bird free to fly, but it is now actually caged and imprisoned by a foreigner, by a thief, by the Anglo-Saxon, by the US to this very day. And I actually had my parents, I called them in Manila and I actually asked them for help on some of the translation here to English and Bayan Ko. And yeah, they really spoke to how many people sang this song in revolt of the Marcos administration. They had not even met each other yet during the EDSA People Power uprising, but they were both there. And it brought back many memories for them of the time. And when martial law was imposed, the song was actually banned. And if you sang the song, yeah, you could be jailed for it, right? And so, but this moment during the EDSA People Power uprising, after Ninoy Aquino's assassination, everyone was singing this song, is what they told me. Everyone was singing it as often as possible, whenever they could. And so, really speaking to the fight that we need to continue. And so, to give us more of a brief history on on martial law as well, I'll pass it over to Marie to tell about that as well.
Thank you so much for that, Joseph. Let's go into the next slide. Okay, so we'll do our best to keep this brief in terms of the content, but in general, martial law was enacted under Marcos Sr. on September 21st, 1972, under Proclamation number 1081. And under martial law, as we know, the conditions really worsened with numerous human rights abuses, extrajudicial killings, massacres, and enforced disappearances, targeting all those who really dissented against Marcos Sr. And he also really utilized martial law to overstay his term limits, allowing himself to maintain a 20-year dictatorship before his ousting. What you see in the picture here is the oh, I don't want to say it in in Tagalog, but the I think it's called the Wall of Heroes. But it's just really to represent and show all of the different people who were martyrs under martial law and under this like really horrendous dictatorship. Um, and it's really through this time that the increasingly worsening economic, political, and social conditions in the Philippines that we also saw the Filipino masses were truly rising up and united to decisively fight against the regime. And so there was really also a broad anti-dictatorship movement against Marcos to fight his ongoing fascism and corruption. And not only that, but we also know that in this time period, the revolutionary movement in the Philippines really was growing in a time of increasingly heightened political social unrest. and during Marcos's presidency. So seeing the people as also decisive to take up revolution in the Philippines. And then, for today in particular, we wanted to kind of just focus and highlight a couple of different stories and uplift, the stories of martial law survivors across different sectors in Philippine society who really engaged in this arduous fight and really just honor the work that they've done. Um, let's see. Let's go to the next slide. So this will be slightly out of order, I realize, because the next slide has the K. Let's go to the KM slide actually. Um, so one of the sectors that we'll be highlighting is the youth sector. Of course, one of the most prominent sectors that was organizing under the Marcos regime. The YS, youth and student sector really came together even before the enactment of martial law during the first quarter storm, where we also know that a lot of YS were studying the conditions in Philippine society and really taking those studies and transforming it into organized mass campaigns and mass actions to really fight the corruption of the Marcos regime. There were many youth organizations at the time, and one of them that is most well known and prominent was Kabataan Makabayan, which is what the big banner is kind of reflecting. KM was a mass organization that was founded by Jose Maria Sison, and they were really pushing to the forefront the basic democratic issues of the masses and really the demands of the Filipino people. It's under the declaration of martial law that KM was forced underground. But even though they were forced underground, we also know that folks really continued to take to the streets and fight and continuing to really do the great work of organizing. And then what also happened too is that some people were also decisive to take up arms and go to the countryside to wage revolution amidst, the heightened, the political imprisonment, tortures, extrajudicial killings. Um, and just like a quick reflection, when I went on the Bayan Peace mission, our group was actually able to meet with, I think, two different martial law survivors, including one who is actually the founder and chairperson of the KM chapter in Olongapo. And I just remember he was like really sharing his experiences with us of being detained and tortured. And even after that, still really being decisive to continue fighting. Something that really stood out to me and the other folks that I was with was that folks were also really talking about how even amidst him sharing about his torture, one of the first things he was really thinking about was how do I protect and warn my comrades of what's happening? So just really seeing like how people were also really trying to continue pushing forward amidst such like a horrible situation. And not only that, but also seeing the role of the youth sector in terms of not just organizing themselves, but also playing a role to support the organizing of workers, peasants, urban poor, and others, and really fulfill that revolutionary role of the youth in the movement and as being part of like the lifeblood of the revolution. So, just part of the framing there. We, if we would like to, we can go back to the next slide, but I think it's fine. I think this next part is you, Joseph, on Indigenous peoples.
Yeah, I can share a little bit about that. So as we'll have the speakers speak more in depth on uh, the struggles in Mindanao. And so Marcos's martial law in Mindanao is often forgotten when we speak of in that era, though many of the Moro indigenous people from there will tell you that they will never forget of the violence of Marcos and during martial law. And so this goes from the infamous Palimbang massacre, the Jabita massacre, the Bingkul massacre, and many other massacres that I was told are not even recorded, right? And so massacres of killings of Moros, including women and children. And so we'll actually have a personal testimony to hear from Tito Potri later this evening. Passing back to you, Mariana Church.
Thank you so much, Joseph. So the last sector just to highlight for us today is the role of the church sector. Very quickly, it's really important for us to recognize the necessity of really building the broadest united front of Filipinos. And that was even reflected of the role of the church sector in rising up against the Marcos dictatorship. So in particular, during the People Power uprising that led to the ouster of Marcos, there's a call from Archbishop Jaime Cardinal Sin, where he basically was really, he was ongoingly criticizing and critical of martial law and was continuously putting public pressure on Marcos to end martial law. And then by the elections, the snap elections in 1986, I should slow down. He put a call out for people to mobilize to the streets against the blatant corruption and election fraud that folks were seeing. And this also really helped tip the scales in showing, just how blatant the corruption was that even church folks were going out into the streets and demanding for his ouster.
Let's go ahead and go to the previous slide, actually, with Bayan in it. Okay, so yeah, it's something that we really want to emphasize is how martial law impacted many of our kababayan. And we must not forget the impacts that Marcos's family had on our people, from the youth, workers, women, peasants, indigenous people, people of faith, and even as migrants, right? And what you see here in this image is actually Bayan being there after people power and showing how long we've been around fighting alongside our kababayan in terms of the multi-sectoral issues that we're fight for. And so actually, Ka Renee will share a little bit about the founding and attending that as well. But something that I really also want to say is that even as migrants, we were actually impacted by the Marcos's regime. One thing of note is really how, Marie and I are actually from the Pacific Northwest, and that's where activists Silme Domingo and Jean Viernes were assassinated by the Marcoses in 1981 for their activism with cannery workers and opposing the Marcoses regime back home. But it was also because of Marcos with the labor export policy that really ramped up the our people being exported as if like as like a commodity practically, being sent around, and because they weren't able to solve the issue of the joblessness back home and making money off of those remittances, right? And Bongbong Marcos and his family continue to attempt to revise the history of the dictatorship. They hide the fact that the wealth that they have is stolen from the Filipino people. And that goes from the attempting to remove their names from the Guinness Book of World Records as the greatest robbery of a government, to having schools teach martial law as if it was the golden years of peace, and making movies like The Maid of Malacanang, where the actors cried and cried to gain empathy for the Marcoses that they betrayed. And so all of this is an ongoing struggle that we're seeing to this day, right? As we continue to want to continue to present the truth. And so tonight we'll actually have Father Ben to speak more to his involvement in the church, Ka Renee as a youth activist, and Tita Potri as an indigenous Moro Muslim activist and former political prisoner, she and also Father Ben. And so all their unique perspectives to share about this truth. And so with that, we'll actually go into the portion of the testimony. So let's go to the next slide on testimonies of martial law survivors. And so we'll start off with Father Ben, or Father Benjamin, who is a parish administrator at Our Lady Perpetual Help in Riverside, California, and a current board member with the National Ecumenical Forum for Filipino Concerns Inland Empire, or NEFCON IE for short, and an educational consultant and Philippine American intercultural school. Father Ben is also a former political detainee under martial law in the 1980s and became a founding member of the Association of Former Political Detainees in the Philippines, or CELDA, and a founding member of the human rights group Karapatan. So let's go ahead and pass it over to Father Ben.
Hi, good evening, good afternoon, everyone. And thank you very much for this opportunity to share with you our martial law experience, and in particular, my experience of martial law and the church involvement in the struggle and resistance against martial law. Um, I was actually detained, a political prisoner not in 1980, but in 1973. I was a fresh college graduate. I was 20 years old then. And I was working in the parish of Lapu-Lapu City. And I asked my superiors if they could allow me to do research on the concept of justice from the Filipino perspective, or the philosophy of justice, as a preparation for my possible work, my master's thesis. In, in October 5, 1973, they raided the rectory where I lived in Lapu-Lapu City. And the military, this was a composite team, they went into my room, which I left unlocked. They found in my room the mimeographing machine, which we called at the time the Gestitner. And they took it and they accused me of being part of the underground publication group that came up with publications, underground publications, basically related to the church group, Christians for National Liberation, criticizing martial law and the military. They also took from me my research on the part of my research on my political and economic writings to provide the economic and political basis for the philosophy and theology of justice. And then they used that as evidence against me, saying that I was a writer for for this underground group. So they brought me to a place which I do not know where. I did not know where. And for 3 days and 3 nights, I was not allowed to sleep. Meanwhile, I heard already people who were arrested, also from the church sector, and they were heavily tortured. I could hear their cries. They could not torture me physically at that time yet, because they knew at the time that I was a brother, uh, a religious brother that was studying to be a priest. After that, they could not take anything. This is what you call the period of tactical interrogation, and which lasted for 2 weeks. They brought me to a dungeon for 2 weeks. And my food there in the dungeon was the food for the pigs. And there was no sunlight. And to break me, they brought 7 farmers from Samar, and they were tortured in front of me, told to punch each other. And I could not say anything. And then they were told to face each other and to masturbate and to drink their own semen. When they did that, that was the time that I cried and I covered myself with my blanket, because I thought it was too much. They could They wanted to break our conscience. They wanted to break our spirit, not just physically, but spiritually. And then they told me that I was going to face a firing squad, that I can ask for my last will. So I asked for my parents to come, and my father was able to come only to see me in 30 seconds. And then after that, I was brought to a formal investigation for 1 week, and that was the time that I was physically tortured. The torturers, I asked them, the torturers were military men as well as agents, military agents, the military intelligence group. So why was I doing this? It's because of my exposure to the farmers. First of all, to the sakada, the seasonal sugar workers of Negros. They were from one generation to the other. They were tied down to the land. And then my exposure to the Lumad of Mindanao, their places were bombed, buried, buried in the ground without telling people that they have killed. And so I thought that the atrocities were really terrible. I think it is good for us to understand the structure of resistance in the church sector in the time of martial law. We organized the promotion of church people's rights in order to highlight the fact that church people have a right of being church, right to live out their faith. Later on, this became promotion of church people's response. As church people, we also had the National Ecumenical Forum to church people, church right, NFCR. This was the anti-imperialist level of resistance of church people. And then that is now gone after after 1995. And then we also had PARA, the Philippine Alliance for Human Rights, and which was later on supplanted by Karapatan. It's a different group now, but Karapatan took over. So in the churches, overall, among the Christian churches, we had organized the ecumenical movement for resistance. In Mindanao, we came up with an interfaith movement, especially bannered by the Mindanao Sulu Pastoral Conference to resist martial law. And there were many, many religious and priests and lay people who went underground, and they provided the warm bodies for the organization of the National People's Army and the expansion of the New People's Army. They became the warm bodies that provided for the organization of the Christians for National Liberation, also for Kaguma, the teachers group, and also later on for Gabriela, the women's group, and also for the National Democratic Front. And as you know, Father Halandoni and Cornelia Desma they came from the church sector. On the side of the one that really backed martial law was the United States. At that time, we had the US bases in the Philippines, and we have the JUSMAG, the Joint US Military Assistance Group. And President Reagan sent the Vice President Bush then, that I think he hailed Marcos as the bulwark of democracy in Asia. Marcos militarized the whole society in the Philippines. Government bureaucracy was militarized. He put their military men. And then he also militarized the civilian population by creating the CHDF. We call that the Civilian Home Defense Force, which now is called CAFGO, or the Citizens Armed Forces Geographical Unit. So this is now what we call the ascendancy of military rule over civilian authority. I would like to suggest that the process of we would like to thank the people and the movements of the people in the conscientization of the church, in the awareness of the church, that we were able to help the progressive movement to grow. But we learned this from the people. The church did not learn this by itself, by the doctrines. They learned it by immersing themselves with the people. When the people talked to them, and they knew the real conditions of the people. So I would like to say that in this process, we had immersion with the people. We had study of the political and economic conditions of the people. We reflected and prayed the cultural aspect of our being church, and then went back to action with the people in being a servant of the people. So I hope that this forum will energize us to continue to resist the vestiges of martial law that continues to exist in Philippine society. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for sharing your story, Father Ben.
You're welcome.
Yeah, really, really appreciate it. I think so as not to delay time too much, we'll go into the next sharing with Karene. Karene is an RN from Washington, based in Redmond, Washington. And he was previously a youth activist during the time of martial law. He was part of the League of Filipino Students and then the August 21st movement. I think we also heard that he was part of the was it the founding of Bayan, or you were present for it, which is really great. But Karine, are you ready to go?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. So, thank you for giving me a chance to speak today and to share whatever experiences I had growing up in Metro Manila during the time of martial law. It was 1972 when martial law was declared. You were correct there, Marie. And I was 12. I was really young, while Father Ben was already in his 20s, early 20s. So I have. So this was all happening to our college graduates like Father Ben at the time, right? But that was all beknownst to me. I had no idea that this was all happening all over the country until my father came up to me and told me that he had to leave for the States to escape. You see, there are different generations during that time that were directly affected. My father was the generation of Ninoy Aquino, Salonga, Manglapos, Charito Planas, Rojas, Osmeña. Those people were his contemporaries. And he was in the Liberal Party in Quezon City. And he was one of the people who were apparently on a list. And true enough, all these other politicians were arrested and detained in Camp Crame, Aguinaldo, and the like. Just with what happened to Father Ben. So he was able to leave, and that's how I guess my story of coming and migrating to the United States came to be. That was the beginning of it. So I was 12, and when you're 12 years old, a lot of things are stick to you, especially things like martial law, oppression, repression, and imprisonment, torture, rape. These things are all new concepts, but a child like myself and my classmates, of course, had to process that. Eventually, and it was a natural process, I guess, that a lot of us became student activists just by osmosis, just by hearing the things that you won't see in the news, you won't see in TV, not ever mentioned. Even in radio, people were very careful, but people had their way of knowing by word of mouth. So became an activist, and you're right, Father Ben, the Jess Stetner, the mimeographing machine, the copying machine of the time, right? We 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 had to go to the back of the of UST, University of Santo Tomas, just to get those done in secrecy, just to give it as handouts to the people. But let me backtrack. When I was in elementary, I actually witnessed a battle between the Kabataan Makabayan students and the Metrocom. Metrocom is short for Metro Command. So they were the toughest of the toughest of police with their batons and everything. And this I witnessed outside of my elementary school along España Avenue. So this was martial law and people were fighting back. Okay, that was all happening, and organizing was happening, and the torturing was happening. So personally, I did not have any, fortunately, didn't get arrested. But I did see torture victims on the side of the road, wrapped in barbed wire with their hands tied behind their back and shot in the back of the head. And also I have a friend in the KMU who was arrested and taken to a safe house. They they shot his foot. He lost a few of his toes, but he survived because he was able to jump into the Pasig River. And no wonder he was missing for a while. And of course, for myself, there was one time when I was in nursing school that I was on my way home in my white uniform when I was accosted by three men and repeatedly stabbed. Of course, what would you do? I had to fight back. But them stabbing me all at the same time was a bit too much. I was able to protect parts of my body and the others, of course. So I almost bled to death. Now, to this day, I am not sure if that was because of my activist involvement and activities or because it was just, they just wanted to. But anyway, it was dangerous times indeed. And in the background of my story, you can hear the chants and the marches that were happening at the time. Organizing was happening among the student sector workers, peasants, and of course the religious as well. And I should also mention that my aunts were nuns, two of them. One was active, the other was not. And that's the way it was in the church at the time. Some were really against protesting in the streets, and then some were more on the side of liberation and fighting for democracy for the people. So at the time also, I'd like to mention that there were book banning. Okay, there were certain books that were not allowed, and one of them was the PSR, Philippine Society and Liberation. But we had to study it in the movement, and there were ways to do it. If you remember, maybe if you've ever cheated in tests in school, you write them in a little piece of paper and you hide them, right? And then you look at them later when you're doing the test. And then if you're caught, you can eat it. That's how portions of the PSR were distributed amongst at least my group at the time. Because once you're caught with the PSR, the book itself, you're toast. You're definitely landing in jail. Now, once a government starts banning books and starts banning songs like Bayan Ko, those are definitely terrible signs, of the times. And I don't want to say red flag, because for me, to this day, a red flag is a good thing. It's the flag of resistance, the flag of democracy and freedom. So I guess in the end of this, Of course, there's the Bayan founding, as mentioned by Joseph, and all of that. What we should take from this is that in times of oppression, despite of and in spite of all of that, the people will rise up. And that's why to this day, I'm 64 now, I'm still very optimistic that that with everybody's effort and struggle, we will reach victory. Might not be in Father Ben's or my time, or Potri's time, but it will, and I'm really optimistic. So if there was people power, remember when you see that story, when you watch it on old video clips and pictures, remember that there were always those who were organizing already at the time that made it happen as well. Of course, Cardinal Sin was like a catalyst in a way in calling the people out. But just know that organizing is indispensable. Okay, we were on the sidelines when all of this was happening, but we were there, the students, the workers, and today we see the same thing happening, continuing, the organizing, everything, because the oppression is still here. It hasn't gone away. It has taken different forms. It has become brutal, really brutal. But we will win. Okay. All right. That's all. I think I've taken too much of your time. Thank you very much for letting me speak. And yeah, kudos to those organizing this. Thank you.
Thank you, Kyle Renee. And yeah, really sharing your experiences. And I really want to echo what you said. In spite of repression, we the people must actually rise up, right? And have that optimism that you spoke of to take action. And from the violent repression and imprisonment that we're seeing being mentioned in the National Capital Region, to the imprisonment of activists as well, from Father Ben's personal experience sharing earlier. We're also seeing like the organizing, the efforts of people organizing into different groups, and as both of them mentioned, from Karapatan to League of Filipino Students to Atom, also Bayan as a founding end. This is a picture that was sent to us from Kyle Renee of like the actual program of the founding that we see here on the screen. But for our next speaker, we're actually going to go focus less on the National Capital Region, and we're actually going to go further south. We're actually going to talk about the repression and the violent repression of the Moro in Mindanao. And with that, Tita Potri, an indigenous Moro Muslim woman who is who's currently a nurse herself as well. And she is also an artist, an activist, a human rights advocate, a climate change, fights for climate change, and also is a cultural worker. And so I'll go ahead and pass it to Tita Potri, who actually has quite a few slides that she'll also be sharing with you all today. Tita, 1 second. You're muted.
Okay. Assalamualaikum. Good evening, everyone. I really appreciate everyone, the organizer and Bayan, in holding this commemoration. This is one history that should never be forgotten, that is being literally and consciously being erased in the memories of the people. So, my name is Potri. I'll start backwards. Like I'll start from now. I was assaulted in the subway in August of 2021, and I was giving away masks, face mask. I'm a public health nurse then. And one of course, the trauma that I experienced all came back. And one of the diagnostic procedure was for me to have MRI of my neck. And when I was inside the MRI machine, I became hysterical, really, really hysterical. And then so I tried to review why I have that reaction to that diagnostic procedure. And then also I withdraw from society after that assault. And I tried going back, reviewing myself why I have that, why I am becoming, why there's something that's going on. And I realized that it's that PTSD that I have experienced that came back. The claustrophobia was, I was blindfolded for 2 weeks. I was then arrested from the classroom when I was between 12 years old. And I was brought to, they called it safe house. You're blindfolded, and you're only allowed to take it off when you go to the bathroom. So that's a prelude of my story. So I came from the Maranao people of one of the 13th indigenous people, Bangsa Moro. Philippines became Muslim in 10th to 15th century through trade. We were not conquered by the Spaniards. However, after December 10, 1898, Philippines was sold to USA under the Treaty of Paris, and it included the island of Mindanao. USA then came and asked the Moro people to register our land. And of course, we did not register our land. Our leaders, our sultan, never registered that land. To then that land was declared no man's land and became a promised land. And we became part of the Philippines. Then, during the Magsaysay time, settlers were carried from Luzon and Visayas, mostly Sakada sugarcane workers. That was the time between that America was so afraid that the revolution against the Spaniards will be born, will light up again. So they have to remove those threats by spreading people and putting them in Mindanao. And then eventually there's a resistance movement among the Muslim people, the Moro people, to separate Mindanao from the Philippines, the separation movement. Eventually, there was the organization called Moro National Liberation Front that was organized, and that was the beginning of the administration of Marcos. And the treatment of the Moro people is beyond brutal. You're always the bad guys. Anything that happens, anything that burns, any crime that happens around the area, it's always pointed towards us. And we are being feared by everyone, by every Filipino, because we are supposed to be bad people. Mamamatay tao. So that's how we were painted by the Spaniards and then by the Americans. The good Moro is the dead Moro. later realized that that's a declamation that the good Indian is the dead Indian. So whatever has been done to the natives here was done towards us. The massacre of Bayang Lanao in 1903, the Maranao people, the massacre of Budahu Sulu in 1906 and 1907, until the 5 minutes left, until the massacre of Jabida, the Jabida massacre. Anyhow, I was arrested in 1973, and I was able to go to school with guard, and I was able to go to the nursing school because the commanding officer was the president of the United Church of Christ. He's a very religious man, that he allowed me to go to school and report to the barracks every Friday, and I'm not allowed to leave the dormitory of Brokenshire School of Nursing. During my arrests in September 23, 1973, I was tortured because I had to name the place, name the people, name the pictures that was presented to me. Who are those people? And bullets were placed in my left hand and breasts, and the 45 caliber was I was hit by a 45 caliber on my left shoulder, which is up to now I'm still suffering it. And when I was with a lot of political prisoners inside the barracks, and every now and then they are taken out from the prison house and made us clean their lawn. And if they are not so happy with what's going on, there's what you call tinikling. Tinikling meaning to say you dance with the bullets of the M16. There's so much story that I would like to tell, but I think I'll just go through the slides so that I'll be guided. Can we go to the next slide? So I became a nurse, and I requested to be totally released, but it was not given to me. So I went to law school so I can fight legally. When I finished law, I went back to the prison to represent the Moros that were left there, and the indigenous dato and the chieftains who don't even speak a single Tagalog. And then I became a suspect again. Next slide, please. And this somebody was killed, and they thought it was me. No fact finding. Just immediately they named that it was me who was that was in the encounter. Next slide, please. So this is my temporary release paper from the 41st PC Company, signed by Cicero Campos, the Brigadier General of the area. So this is my temporary release so that I can go take the board exam of the nursing, go to the nursing school, and then go to travel so that I can take exams. The next slide, please. This is Marcos Human Rights Litigation. This is now after the class suit. I should have read the paper so easily. I can relate to you all the tortures that I have undergone. It's just so hard for me to tell that story. So this is just one of the check that is what they call that, token. When we were celebrating that we won against Marcos, I didn't really know. I didn't realize that the Filipinos has amnesia on what happened with the Marcos senior. Next slide, please. This is the letter that we received from the Marcos Human Rights Litigation. And their lawyer was Robert Swift. Next slide, please. So this is the headquarters. It's not PC anymore. It's now PNP, right? Next slide, please. This is just to uplift my spirit that I'm in New York. Somebody wrote about me. But the struggle never stopped. So what is not included in the picture now are the demonstrations and rallies that we organized when during Joseph Estrada, the president who declared all-out Moro war. And what is not in the photo that I cannot find is the photo when I went home to Marawi with the background of the masjid and the ancestral houses. Our ancestral houses, like 5 of them, were seized to the ground by President Duterte. So when I started talking about the assault I have undergone in the subway, I am so sad that we are still here, working hard to send money to the Philippines, serving this country that is actually has a foreign policy that will totally steal our land as Filipinos. Our Filipino leaders, or I don't know how Filipinos can have that amnesia, or does Filipino really understand how rich we are as a country, and why up to now we did not know, we don't have the understanding of taking back our wealth? Why are we allowing foreign investment, or why are we allowing the imperialists to take over when there are countries that are successful with their national democracy? When there are countries that are able to stand and say, we don't want you to, if you want to use our natural resources in our own terms. So martial law of Marcos is actually just the beginning of the pimping of every president of the Philippines in giving away our land. And that martial law is the total opening of the Philippine government to foreign industries to come in. And every leader after that became just a CEO of the multinational companies. Every president of the Philippines became a CEO of the imperialists. I think I will end there. And please ask me question later. This is just a photo that I'm not supposed to include that in this presentation, but somebody sent this to me during Mother's Day. That's part of me uplifting myself, that there is always hope. There is always that experiences we have that we have to use as a lesson that we have to go on, and we will not let our beautiful country, our beautiful, ang mayaman nating bayan, hindi natin dapat ipaubaya. We cannot allow this in the hands of the foreign investors, the foreign policy. We cannot allow our land again to be taken by the imperialists. So we have to do something. Organizing is good. We have to do more than that. So because we are here in the US, we can influence the parliamentary process. We can influence the policy to stop the foreign intervention. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Tita Potri. So we're actually, I'll just say a little bit more. I really want to say thank you so much for giving us your testimony and really giving us a larger scope of the impacts of not just Marcos's martial law, but also U.S. imperialism as a whole, uh, and how it impacts not just Luzon, right? It also impacts the entire of the Philippines, and it impacts Mindanao and impacts the Moro people. And so, before we go into questions, let's just give up many hearts and thank yous to our speakers, the survivors of martial law, and for giving their testimonies of their time. Uh, all the survivors that shared their stories, all their testimonies that they gave today, uh, really gave us a very strong message for us. Right? We cannot forget the truth, the impacts of martial law, the larger picture of that US imperialism is working alongside the elite to continue to take the wealth from our beautiful country. And we must raise the red flag of resistance and continue to fight against the systems that oppress and exploit our people. So we'll actually open up for a little bit on questions. Oh, I'm sorry, this is incorrect in our program. We're actually going to go into a cultural next. So I'll pass it to Marie to share about the cultural.
Yeah. Thank you, Joseph. Okay, so this next cultural was recorded from Iris of Anak Bayan Inland Empire, and just a brief that they wrote on it, but they said that this next cultural was written during martial law and speaks on spreading the news of the conditions faced by the Filipino people during this time. It touches upon the environmental impact of martial law and feelings of loss and devastation from witnessing the destruction of the Filipino spirit through martial law. I think with that, we can go ahead and play the cultural. Thank you so much for recording that for us today, Iris. And then also thank you in general to the folks who shared videos on their for the culturals today. For this next part, we're going to connect the stories of martial law to also the current conditions of the worsening crisis happening in the Philippines with the increased militarization, fascism, and state repression happening under Marcos Jr. today. The first person I'd like to introduce is Andan, who is part of Bayan USA. This past May, Andan and I were part of a delegation of 28 organizers across the country who went on Bayan's peace mission, the first one, I think, since 2019, to really continue to uncover the current conditions of increased U.S. militarism in the Philippines, and especially after the opening of even more EDCA sites in the Philippines. Andan in particular was able to go to Marawi and learn more about the impacts of martial law in Marawi under Duterte.
Hi everyone, can you hear me? Okay. First off, I just want to share a huge token of appreciation to Father Ben, to Karine, Tita Potri, activists who have dedicated so much of themselves, even after such horrific things that they went through, toward continuing to fight. And I think there's so much that we can learn from them. Many of us here who are younger activists who were fortunate not to have undergone the horrors of martial law, but continue to fight for the Filipino people. These are folks who have weathered through unimaginable horror, through fatigue, through even the pessimism that modern day society tries to push onto us, and keep going. And so we are in a very difficult time right now, with so much war and threat of war around us. And it's easy to be pessimistic, but I think it would be a disservice to our three amazing resource speakers and the many others who sacrificed their lives and continue to sacrifice their lives to fight for a different kind of society that we know is possible. And so please, please, please maximize this time to ask any questions to Father Ben, Karine, Tita Potri. These are people who have so much to share, and it would be a shame if we couldn't, if we couldn't talk a little bit more with them about their experiences and the valuable lessons they have. I wanted to speak about connecting what happened more than 50 years ago to today. And, it's timely that we're having this webinar and sharing the day after the US presidential debate between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. No matter where you side, for the listeners here, it is important to think about what impacts does the United States have on the people, the most exploited, the most oppressed, the most marginalized. And that is how you gauge whether any kind of party is the people or not. We can see what's happening in Palestine right now, and the billions of dollars that both the Democratic and Republican parties pour towards the bombs that are leaving craters in evacuation tents. And from our speakers just now, you can also see which presidents, US presidents, whether Democratic, whether Republican, supported a fascist dictatorship in the Philippines under Ferdinand Marcos Sr. Father Ben talked about Reagan and Bush's support, calling Marcos the bulwark of democracy. We see it up until today, right? We're under the current Biden administration. $500 million was promised to the fascist Philippine military. And all these things tell us that martial law under Ferdinand Marcos Sr. was a horrific time of explicit military rule. That's what martial law means, right? Military law. But that martial law also never ended in many of the implicit ways and secret ways that every single succeeding regime pushed, right? Like Tita Potri mentioned, whether through the economics or whether through the military policy itself, right? And nowhere is that more true than in a place like Mindanao, where the decades of historical injustice happened much earlier than martial law under Marcos Sr. I wanted to share screens, a couple photos. As Marie mentioned, Bayan USA recently sent a delegation to the Philippines on a peace mission. And this has historically been a mission to highlight the impacts of US war, and particularly in Mindanao. And we were able to visit Marawi. Marawi is a city, holy city in Mindanao to the Maranao people and to all indigenous Moro people there. And in one of the museums there is a map. I hope you can see my screen. A map here of the military occupation in Lanao. And you can see here circled Marawi City. And this is a map chronicling 100 years of military occupation in Lanao alone. And why this is so important is because even after the horrors that Tita Potri and the Maranao people experienced in the 70s and 80s under martial law, it didn't stop the Philippine government, nor did it stop the US government from enacting the same horrors years later when Mindanao was placed under martial law in 2017 by President Rodrigo Duterte. The siege of Marawi City, and by siege, I mean destruction, happened because of unrest that the Philippine government was never able to decisively resolve because the fundamental needs of the Maranao people, of the Filipino people at that, were never granted, right? The right for self-determination of indigenous peoples, the right to livelihood, the right to land, ancestral land. All of these have historically caused self-determination groups to rise up and fight. The same reasons why there were people in the Kapatang Makabayan, people who rose up to join the armed struggle against the fascist Marcos dictatorship. It's because all of these root problems of society were never resolved, right? And so when you reached a boiling point in Marawi in 2017, the US came, right? There was a conflict that could have been resolved through negotiation between Maute Group, a group of folks who are also trying to assert self-determination for the Moro people. It ended up being an entire war on the people of Marawi. And the city was decimated. I have some photos here. This is what the city looks like now, 7 years later after the siege, and the buildings are still completely destroyed, no renovations whatsoever. You can go up them, you can see the vegetation growing everywhere because there has been no reconstruction whatsoever, despite the fact the Philippine government has said that rehabilitation of Marawi City was 100% complete. I want to ask people if this looks like 100% complete rehabilitation to people. And what this means for the people is that the hundreds of thousands of people displaced from the siege in Marawi, from martial law in Marawi, they're forced to live in evacuation centers that look like this. Evacuation centers that don't have potable or access to potable water. They don't have sanitation systems. The toilets, which are just holes dug in the ground, are full because it's been 7 years with no sustainable options, right? Some of the residents in these evacuation centers are now even having to pay for their own electricity, having to pay for rent, and with no compensation, no rehabilitation in sight. And so the people who have been living here for 7 years are also demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding accountability, and most importantly, demanding a just and dignified return to their homes. And I bring this up today because we're here in 2024, right? 51, almost 52 years since the declaration of martial law. And the question that we want to pose to everyone here is, yes, the dictatorship was overthrown, but do the root problems still remain, right? Is the fascism still there in the Philippines? Is the imperialist plunder still there in the Philippines? Is the widespread landlessness still there in the Philippines? And of course, the answer to all of those things is yes, right? Because why else would you have an entire city razed to the ground, US backed, right? These were US intelligence that helped to steer the operations in Marawi, US drones, US missiles, Israeli missiles for that matter, complete media blackout so that the narrative could be controlled, right, in what happened to this city. And now on these, holy grounds for the Moro people, what's being built instead are tourism destinations like stadiums, sports stadiums, and also US-backed military facilities, right? Being funded for supposedly the Philippine Army, but also using funds from EDCA, the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement of the United States. And so, from martial law till today, from martial law under Marcos Sr. to the current status under Marcos Jr., a lot of these same horrors that Father Ben, that Tita Potri, that Karane mentioned continue to happen. And the onus is on us, right? A newer generation of activists to link up with folks who have been fighting for decades, to put our heads together, to put our resources together, and most importantly, to put our time and our bodies together to figure out how to fight the system, because it's urgent. The Philippines, as Nico will share later, is in dire straits, but the Filipino people are fighting back, and we should view ourselves as part of those people. And for folks who are not Filipino on this call, the solidarity movement with the Philippines is so, so important. In the United States, the support for the Filipino people's struggle for national sovereignty and democracy under Marcos Sr.'s martial law was very vibrant, and we are calling on all allies to build that same movement again. So again, from martial law under Marcos Sr. to the de facto martial law under Marcos Jr., the same root problems of landlessness, of fascist attacks, of imperialist plunder still continue to this day. Marawi, Mindanao is a testament to that. And the need to continue fighting for national sovereignty, for democratic rights continues more than ever. So I'll stop there.
Thank you so much, Andan. I really connecting in like how we've seen what was from the testimonies to even now what we're seeing with the current situation that's happening. And as we're seeing, there's this continued effort of the Philippine government with their corruption, their exploitation, and even taking advantage of these disasters that are happening in the pursuit of profit. And so really emphasizing that we need to continue to do something, as Andan was saying. We really need to put in the time, our bodies, and our efforts into solving this problem, Filipino or ally. And so we'll actually be passing it on to Nico to share a little bit more on the impacts of that they also saw in the Philippines. So Nico of Bayan USA will share about their integration in the Philippines and the current surveillance and repression of activists and urban poor and peasant farmers as well. So we can have a bigger scope as well on what is the current issues happening today. Nico?
Hi. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat. Ako si Nico. I'm Nico. I am the Secretary General of Bayan USA. And have very recently returned from the Philippines in part of an exposure program that we conducted in ABUSA for us to really see the conditions of the Philippines and the Filipino people, and to really learn from the many great lessons of organizing and continuing to expand the national democratic movement, not just among youth, but among all exploited and oppressed Filipino people. I also want to give my thanks to our speakers earlier, Father Ben, Tita Potri, Renee, for the sharings that they've and the lessons that they've given us, even in just a short time they were able to speak with us tonight. Um, and I guess just to preface a little bit of my sharing, I have heard a few times now Father Ben's story, and it was really one that resonated with me when I was in the Philippines, really integrating with the peasant and farm worker community in Isabela. But before I go into that, I'll be sharing a little bit about how uh, how in many ways what Father Ben is saying is true, that there are still many remnants of the martial law that was started by the Marcos Sr. regime. And there are still so many problems and wounds that are still open from that era that Marcos Jr. continues to rub salt into and continues to harm and throw the Filipino people under the bus. In many ways, we can see that through the economic crisis that is so undeniable. We can see that from the state repression that the organizers that we were able to spend a short time with experience, and even for some among us on the Bayan USA trip, even experienced ourselves. And for myself, with the time that I spent in the Philippines, I was able to really integrate with two communities, with Kadamay in the National Capital Region, and with Amihan, a peasant women's organization in Isabela. And to give a picture of the economic crisis that's really impacting the Philippines right now, we can set a reminder, right, of what the National Economic and Development Authority, or the NEDA, said very recently, that the Filipino can survive off of 21 pesos per meal. Which just goes to show how out of touch with the reality of the Filipino masses the Marcos regime currently is. In our time with Kadamay, we were able to spend a few days in various communities in the National Capital Region, but primarily in Quezon City. We were able to spend some time in San Isidro, which is near Philippine Science High School, if folks are familiar, near SM North EDSA, Payatas, which is in Quezon City, which is really on the border na of Southern Tagalog, and in San Roque, Sitio San Roque, which is also in the heart of Quezon City. And here is where you can really see how just how dire the economic situation really is in the Philippines. You can see that the reason why people have to choose to live in conditions like this, with unfinished homes, makeshift homes, using whatever materials they can find, in very cramped quarters, is because of one, the landlessness that they experience in their home provinces, and then they come to the cities and are forced to take up work that is irregular, and barely pays a livable wage, and people barely have a real salary. And oftentimes, because these people come to the National Capital Region and build informal homes in land that doesn't necessarily on paper belong to them, these communities are often the victims of demolition and relocation, which creates this very a vicious cycle of displacement all across the Philippines. From the initial displacement that many Filipinos face from displacement from their home provinces due to landlessness, due to the plummeting cost of rice grain. People are forced to find work in the cities, and when they do find work in the cities, and build their homes in these informal settlements, They were again displaced to make way for various infrastructure projects that that really don't prioritize the Filipino people, who are primarily peasants and workers. The many things that they build are luxury condos and apartments, casinos that are owned by landlord families like the Ayala family, private and inaccessible hospitals, and other infrastructure projects like major highways, like the extension of the Manila Skyway, which is already very inaccessible for the basic masses and is really used to be able to move large amounts of resources from the provinces all the way down to the different ports for export. After being displaced, people are relocated to provinces such as Rizal, Bulacan, to more unfinished homes with no roofs, windows, or doors. A batch of our folks from Anak Bayan were also able to visit one of these communities in San Jose del Monte, Bulacan, in which they witnessed just how unprepared the government is to really try and relocate and rehome these people who have been displaced from the national capital region. Which continues to just reinforce this internal cycle of migration and displacement in the Philippines. But in order to respond to these ongoing issues of financial instability, joblessness, lack of housing, the urban poor in the cities have been forced to really self-organize, to build organizations like Kadamay to address these problems by starting community gardens, just to show, right, that 21 pesos per meal is not enough, that on top of the work that they already have to do to make a living, they have to grow their own food in order to be able to feed themselves and their families. And they really build these community organizations because the government refuses to be able to address their needs. And just to give a picture of what that looks like, right? For the proposed 2025 budget of the Marcos regime, the Department of Public Works and Highways actually has an allotted budget of close to 1 trillion pesos. While any budget that goes to any housing programs for the urban poor and for all Filipinos is only 1.8 billion pesos, is going to show that where are really the priorities of the Philippine government. And because people are pushed to self-organize and really fight for Philippines that's truly free, that truly addresses the needs of the Filipino people, they are then repressed, right? Very similar to the stories that our kasamas in the beginning were able to share through the NTF-LCAC, right? The National Task Force and Local Communist Armed Conflict. The Marcos regime has really weaponized the entirety of the Philippine bureaucracy, all the way from the president in Malacanang and all the way down to the barangays with even their barangay captains, to really villainize and attack these people's organizations. The ways that they do this is that they will bribe the Filipino masses, and due to their severe hardship, have no option but to take money, right? And are forced to quote unquote surrender, forced to sign waivers claiming that they're withdrawing their support from the CPP, the NPA, or the NDF, when in reality, they have no connection to these organizations. But the government wants to make it look like that it's actually doing something to address the root of armed conflict in the Philippines. When in reality, in order to address the root of armed conflict in the Philippines, they must meet the needs of the Filipino people, which is to address the problem of land and the problem of the lack of industrialization in the Philippines. On top of this are the killings that these organizers face. For example, in Kadamay, the previous Secretary General of Kadamay was assassinated in 2020, Carlitz Badion. And more recently, other activists within Kadamay, like Mark Lee Bacasno in Montalban, Rizal, were also killed. And to quickly wrap it all up, what I also do want to share is our experience in Isabela, which just goes to show that in the midst of the economic crisis and the state repression, especially in the countryside where de facto martial law really is the status quo, we were able to spend some time in a small town in Isabela, right near the foothills of the Sierra Madres, which I found was very inspiring because from the stories that were shared earlier, the Sierra Madres was really a place where activists during the period of martial law sought refuge and utilized these mountains to be able to fight back against the military rule under the Marcos Sr. regime. In this small town, there is rampant corruption and state repression being spearheaded, right, by the landlord mayor, who often uses her influence to be able to withhold aid to those who do not support her policies and her land grabbing, who implements bogus scholarship programs that do not really give the youth the money that they need to be able to attend schools, and uses her influence and power to grab mining lands and farmlands, prime mining lands and farmlands, so that she can reap the profits for herself. We heard from a local pastor that they were looking for a group of foreigners. And just to reiterate what Andan had told us earlier is that, one, we are not foreigners, we are Filipinos. And we have a right to be in the Philippines and a right to contribute to the change that we want to see in the Philippines. But they were looking for a group of foreigners, aka us, who were spending time with the local organizers in the area. They were looking for us because we were there actually because we were invited by the local organizers there to learn from and help aid in the building of a local youth organization in the area, of which historically has been repressed over time, where in their campuses, seminars, red tagging and terror tagging seminars are the norm, where they say that do not join orgs like Anak Bayan or Kabataan Party List because they will recruit you to the NPA. But in our time there, we met many youth who were affected by this, but were not afraid to fight back, and were not afraid to build up their own organizations. And it's so important to build organizations in places like Isabela and Cagayan Valley, because this is also a very strategic area that the US wants to take advantage of, right? 3 of the new EDCA sites that are being built in the Philippines or have been built are in Cagayan Valley. Naval Base Camilo Osayas in Santa Ana, Cagayan, Camp Melchor de la Cruz in Gamu, Isabela, and the Lalo Airport in Cagayan, which many of our folks from the Bayan Peace Mission were also able to visit and see. And despite the unmarked cars that were driving past where we were staying, despite the police going around and asking the locals if there are those who are trying to organize something in their area, the youth were not shaken by this condition. They knew that while the stakes were high for them to be in people's organizations, the stakes were even higher if nothing changes for their communities. And I think that is a big lesson that we've learned from our speakers earlier, and that we continue to learn by continuing to organize, continuing to go back home to the Philippines to learn the lessons, and to really experience what it means to organize against the hardship and repression of the Marcos regime. That even during the martial law of Marcos Sr., the people self-organized. The people built organizations like Kabataang Makabayan, Makibaka, and more to be able to fight back against the Marcos regime. And up until today, now that we are under another Marcos who continues to sell out the Filipino people to imperialist interests, who continues to choose to repress, harm, kill, disappear the Filipino people, for daring to ask just for a little bit more, the youth that we met in Isabela did not back down. They rose up to the challenge, and in a small kubo, in a small town in Cagayan, they took up an oath saying that they will become activists for the masses, that they will continue to serve the people wholeheartedly. We saw there that the fight will continue. And the fight will continue, like Karene says, until we win, until we seize victory. So I am a little bit over time and I apologize, but we should take the example of the masses in the Philippines, where organizing is a dangerous thing to do, right? Where the study of PSR, just like back then and now, is almost taboo because of the fascist NTF LCAC that Marcos has set up. And let us utilize the freedom that we have here in the US to be able to organize, to be able to talk about the National Democratic Movement, to talk about an independent Philippines, to talk about Philippine society and revolution, to continue to put pressure on the Marcos regime on our end here from the belly of the imperialist beast, and eventually go back home to the Philippines and contribute to the fight to see a liberated Philippines that we have a big role to play in as well. Well, thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Nico. And I think it doesn't seem like we've received any questions. Is that correct? Not, I think if questions come up for you all today, for any of our speakers, whether that is from from Father Ben, from Tita Potri, Ka Renee, or even Andan and Nico, please let us know, or even let know organizer that's there if you have more questions about how to be more involved or any other things that are happening to get to have a better grasp of what to do, right? Because yeah, it's important for us to continue to speak up. So if there's no questions, let's go ahead and go to the closing for today. And so as we connect the past to the present, oh, sorry, go ahead. I'm done.
Can I ask a question?
Oh, okay. Yeah, go for it.
Okay. So for Karen and Tita Potri, just wondering if you have any lessons you want to share or words of wisdom for newer activists, how you've been able to, weather the storm and keep on fighting after all these years, since I know we have a long road ahead of us.
Okay, I'll jump in. So here in New York, the story has to go on, right? Stories of our ancestors has to be told again and again. In my case, the story of Sultan Kudarat, who fought against the Spaniards so that they will not penetrate Mindanao, is not told actually to the Filipinos. Not even, I've been trying to look at the history books. I once was a history teacher in Ateneo de Davao, but there's no one-liner about Sultan Kudarat. Most of the story about the Moros were bad people, were pirates or traitors. So for me, if I give you my card, there's at the back it says, if you remember the resilience of your ancestors, you will never be conquered. So our history, again and again, we have to remember it clearly and learn from it. Where are we going to, where and what strength do we have that we can make use of to continue that struggle? We cannot give up. We could not give up because Philippines is ours, right? Even though we are anywhere in this world, we're in diaspora, our umbilical cord is planted in that land. Our people are there, and the continuity of the colonization, which is now actually sad because it's called neo-colonization, because our colonizers are people who identify as Filipinos too. So it's up to us to understand which part of us are colonizers and how are we going to struggle, how to struggle that and strengthen the part of us to fight the colonizers. So it is very clear that right now our minds are diverted. Filipinos, the minds are diverted. We like hype. We like sensationalism. And we like storytelling. Of course, that's our nature. We're storytellers. But the thing is, we like movies, we like superstars. Now, what's happening right now is while you have 16,000 foreign troops in the Philippines, we are too busy following up the story of who's this Banban mayor, her escape, Alice Go, Kibuloy, who's the son of Nino Mulak. So that's the so juicy reality TV that we're following up. Meanwhile, Tamparan, the the biggest gold deposit in the world, second biggest, is being eaten, and the people and the indigenous people that's in there is being militarized, and the militarization is not known to us, not known to the world, because we're too busy looking at this. You want Philippines? Oh, it's the issue of that mayor who escaped. Now, I don't have TV myself. I mean, I cannot let go any minute, any second, while I'm still living, while the two bits of my heart is still there. We have to continue connecting to each other and realizing that we may be in the area where we can choose what you want to eat, but that's how much punishment do we get being uprooted from our own land, and meanwhile, who is enjoying our land, and our people who's left there are asking money from us here like we are the ATM, because they don't have the land anymore to plant rice, and we have to import rice, and we're at the mercy of the prices. But we have to go to the roots again and again. We have to go to the roots and see that this has to stop. This has to stop. If it's militarization that is used against us, then are we just going to continue our beauty contests, continue to have Miss Universe, continue to be so I don't I'm always recruiting. What I mean is, I'm always telling people, the young people, that this issue of landlessness is very artificial. Landlessness that is taken by, I mean, we can solve this if we just have to stand that please don't take our land. Now, it's our very own neo-colonizers, our own governmental system that allows that. So if we have to go through parliamentary ways, then let's go through election. Or if here in US, as I said earlier, we have to influence policy here to stop the colonization. Like, I don't know how much can I say. There's so many ways that we can be aware. I don't know, I'm preaching to the choir, but I hope the choir will continue singing, and then continue singing that song so that everyone can be together. And let's not stop. No turning back. I've been wounded. It did not heal. It's still there. The scar is there. And we don't want the wounds actually that is undergone and that is experiencing by everyone is the being cut off from the real story of our history. And how much could that be when your children's children don't know the story of the origin of your people? I mean, I know, I'll stop that. I can go 7 days and 7 nights.
I'd also like to respond to the question. And Nico, by the way, you guys are amazing. What you've said and contributed and added to this event tonight is just incredible, and I'm speechless, so to speak. You guys are amazing, and I'm sure all the other people, kasamas, around us there that have not had a chance to speak are just the same. The youth are incredible. Well, anyway, Tita Porty, if I may call you Tita, uh, we're probably the same age, mentioned about the ways of struggle. So before you can even struggle, guys, and I'll make this quick, it's important to know that our struggle is not a sprint, it's a marathon, and prepare yourselves for that, right? The struggle and our ability to join and contribute, it what they call it, it waxes and wanes through time. And I've done that. There are times that I have left, not completely, activities or mga gawa, because of family, and that's where the balance comes. In answer to the question, there's got to be balance between your life, your happiness, and also the cause, our struggle, right? And there are ways of struggles, are many, and I'd like to take a few words from Kasamang Nor Colmenares. It says the struggle is in the calle or calzada. These are the 4Ks: calzada, Congreso, Corte, and Canayunan. Okay, so we can choose. We can be part of it in one way or many ways. So yeah. So oh, and quickly, recently I did my DNA test, and it's very interesting to note that my ancestors came from China, Central, Western, and Southern. And then I thought about that. I thought about it really hard, and I realized that my ancestors in my blood is a history of struggle and forced migration. Of course, my ancestors moved from China to the Philippines because of hunger, because of hardship, right? And then again, I did the same thing. I came to the United States, just like your parents, and just like you probably did. So, and the mere fact that you're in the movement proves that that is in your blood. We have that one thing in common, my brothers, sisters. So yeah, so just hold on to your kasamas, stay close and draw strength from them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tita Potri and Renee. I think that's actually a really great way we can close off for today's webinar, as we see it as like a call to action, right? It's important for us to be reminded of one, taking up this the efforts to action. And if you are part of the choir, let's continue to sing, as Tita Potri said. It's an effort to say that we need to really bring this connection from the past to the present, and continue to carry out the efforts to fight. Bongbong Marcos continues to carry out his father's legacy of repression, surveillance, extrajudicial killings, the labor export policy to profit off our people's remittances, and the subservience to U.S. imperialism. As we continue to see, as Tita Potri was mentioning, the Philippines is a neo-colony, a new type of colony that is still very much subservient to the U.S. And so let us remind ourselves, and let us remind also others, right, that we need to speak up together. It is crucial that we continue to speak up, as our voices does have value. It does have an impact. And in the everyday struggles we face can make, when we make these struggles when we see these struggles and we're able to face them, we can actually make what seems to be impossible possible, right? And so we've already ousted Marcos in the past with over 2 million Filipinos on the street. We've terminated the U.S. military bases and the rejection of the extension of 10 years. But what we're seeing is, as we've heard today, it continues to happen, right? A whole new system needs to take over, a whole new way of wave upon wave of people speaking up and fighting against this system and making what seems to be impossible actually possible. And that means fighting for our people, fighting for our kababayan back home. So yeah, it's crucial for us to take up the fight. And so let's take a look at some of the calls to action that we really want to take up for today's, for ending for today. Let's go ahead and take a look at the slide deck. Can we pull that up? And then Marie, can you share a little bit about what we want to really push for in continuing the fight?
Yes, for sure. Slide deck. Okay, thank you so much. Let's go to the next slide. So just very quickly, continue to propagate the Makabayan blocks slate. Just in terms of also really seeing that these folks are representing across different sectors, all the different issues of the Filipino people. Also thinking about how folks are some of the people on the slate are actually also survivors of martial law. Some are continuing to organize and really working across different sectors of people. And those folks are also people who really know the true character of the Philippines and also the true character of the ruling parties that are continuing to jockey and fight for power um, against like a genuine change in the Philippines. But the people that are part of the Makabayan slate are really trying to meet some of those really basic democratic demands and representing those sectors. So just wanted to prop and share that. Something just so folks are aware is that overseas absentee voter registration deadline, I believe, is September 30th, and that there is a forthcoming overseas absentee voter registration training that I believe Bayan USA will be hosting. And that if folks are also, you know, in your experiences of working with folks amidst your different organizations or with different people in different areas, you're hearing that there's difficulties with the voter registration process. There's also a Contra Dia report form that we are really encouraging folks to fill out to um, especially as we're trying to really encourage that for those who would like to participate and vote in the elections this year or in 2025, people are more than welcome to do so. Let's go to the next slide. So again, you saw this at the beginning of the webinar, but this is just a reminder for folks to please consider donating to Bayan. You can do so through the QR code there, but any little bit of donation helps to really continue supporting the overall work of Bayan here in the US, and then as we're able to really support the organizing and work that's happening ongoingly in the Philippines. So please consider. Thank you all. And then next slide are just some final additional calls to action. If if any folks are feeling really agitated and want to really participate in you know, in organizing for the National Democratic Movement, please consider joining an ND organization. The tiny URL is like an interest form, but you're also able to talk to, you know, the folks that have also helped bring you out here today. There is also an interest form for the US Out of the Philippines campaign, which I think it's not on this slide. I think it just needs to be refreshed, but we can drop the link in the chat also. Oh wait, it is in the chat. But please consider signing on to it if you or your organization are interested in this campaign. And then let's see, any other final things? Talked about the Contradaya, but really again, supporting if there are folks out there that are really interested in in registering. And then of course, we really encourage everyone to support and participate in any anti-dictatorship actions on the anniversary of martial law, which is the 21st. I believe different areas have different things going on to address and to continue to combat the historical revisionism of the current Marcos regime, to really highlight and show the true what truly did happen against this narrative of the golden years. But that is all. Thank you all so much for being here today.